Good afternoon. You are tuned into WRFG here in Atlanta. This is Diane Mathowitz with the Labor Forum. And my co-host, Paul McLennan, is seated next to me here in the studio. And today's program is our first of 2015. Hard to believe, isn't it, Paul?
It is.
It is. These years keep rolling by. I want to make sure that you're aware that the song that always starts the program off is "We Do the Work" by John Fromer, and it comes from a CD of the same title. He has written a whole bunch of really good songs, and of course that's one of my favorites, and that's why I selected it to be the theme song of this program. The opinions that are expressed on this WRFG program, though, are not necessarily those of the Board of Directors, staff, or volunteers here at WRFG. But this program's been on the air, initiated by Gary Washington back in 1986, and it has been a constant program here on WRFG because it goes to the mission of this station. You know, lots of times people ask about WRFG, what it's all about. We've been on air 41 years. It was initiated way back in the 70s by a group of progressive activists here in the city who felt that there needed to be a radio station, a form of communication that was used really for the purpose of enlightening and uplifting all those that are pretty much left out of this capitalist system, this for-profit, the rich talk, the poor work system. And so that's been our mission for the last 41 years, and we have done it largely because we have been supported by you, our listeners, by the community. And we want to thank you here as we start 2015 and going into our 42nd year on air this summer for that long and deep felt support. And we encourage you to figure out the best you can the ways that you might contribute to the growth and development of this radio station. It becomes even more important now that media is so consolidated and that the news is so homogenized. And it's hardly news anymore. It's mostly propaganda, all designed to keep us uninformed. So anyway, we've established this format here at the Labor Forum since we moved to an hour. First we do labor headlines, and then we have a really always interesting piece of labor history that Paul brings to us. So we'll go ahead and start with that. Oh, before I begin, one of the things that the Labor Forum sort of, I guess one of our viewpoints is that when we are talking about labor and we're talking about workers, we're not talking necessarily about only the people that have a job, and certainly not only the people that are in unionized workforces. We're talking about really everybody for whom the only way to manage to survive is that they sell their labor, they have a job, and that somebody who owns something, whether it's a mine or a factory or a business, really gets to make a determination whether we live or die, whether we've got a job. And so I want to make special note that all of us right now, as we go into these next several days with really frigid temperatures, possibly going down into single digits, that there are thousands of working class people who don't have homes and who are out on the streets. They've either been laid off, they have either come back from a war which has damaged them either physically or psychologically. They may have an addiction. They may have been foreclosed on by these banks that only consider profit in terms instead of what a home really is, which is a place to nurture and further a family and people. And so that the Task Force for the Homeless, which is located on Peachtree Street, 477 Peachtree Street and Pine, is probably one of the few institutions that's left here in this city that really works so hard to make sure that people without shelter don't die on the streets of Atlanta. So I want to encourage you that if you have any spare blankets, if you're able to contribute bottled water, that over the next couple days this will actually probably make a difference between life and death for someone who finds themselves without a home. So you can go to the entrance of the Peachtree Pine Shelter. It's on the Pine Street side, and deliver your blankets, cases, or even a few bottles of water. Every little bit will help. And there'll be some brothers who will have security vests on, and please do give your items that you're contributing to them. You also can go onto their website and donate money as well. And that's the Task Force for the Homeless. You can look it up. All right, with that, I'm going to start my labor headlines for today, January 5th, 2015. It's going to take me a while to get used to both saying that and writing it, so I'm going to repeat it. January 5th, 2015. This is news from Panama. On December 23rd, 1,000 workers began a strike demanding better safety and treatment on a huge multi-billion-dollar project to expand the Panama Canal. The canal is adding a third set of locks capable of handling the mega freighters preferred by global shipping companies. And you know, this is why they're expanding the port here in Georgia. This is those very same mega freighters. The workers took action after supervisors ordered 3 men to return to work in the rain, even though they had just sustained electrical shocks. Other grievances included chronic shortages of overtime pay, incorrect hours, and failure to pay for compensated leave. They also demanded the rehiring of a worker fired after a dispute with a boss. The strike was settled to the workers' satisfaction on January 3rd, 2015, so just on Saturday. The $5.25 billion expansion began in 2007, but like the original canal, has been plagued by problems, forcing the completion date to be extended 2 additional years to 2016. An estimated 30,000 workers died during the decades taken by the French and U.S. to construct a passageway through Panama to connect the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. In national news, in California, mental health professionals who work for the giant corporation, Kaiser Permanente, have announced their intention to stage a week-long strike starting next Monday. The issue motivating the job action by these 2,600 psychologists, therapists, and social workers, members of the National Union of Healthcare Workers, is the failure of the company to provide timely, quality mental health care to patients. The workers say the problem is insufficient staff to meet the demands for mental health services, causing unsafe, even dangerous delays for those referred for care. Some 700 other health professionals in other departments at Kaiser Permanente, who face the same issue of too few staff, are expected to join the strike. In 2013, the state of California fined Kaiser Permanente $4 million for failing to provide timely mental health treatment to its members. The Affordable Health Care Act greatly expanded required treatment and prevention services to be covered under insurance policies. However, as this labor headline reveals, the for-profit health industry is failing to meet its legal obligations. Here in Atlanta, hundreds of Coca-Cola employees based at the company's headquarters are poised to hear the news that they are losing their jobs. The announcement of the layoffs of some 2,000 workers worldwide is expected any day. With a total employment of almost 131,000 people, and close to 9,000 of them in Atlanta, a large percentage of the job losses are projected to be here at the corporate headquarters. The giant soft drink company with its carbonated high-caloric drinks has long dominated not just the industry, but is a global icon of Western culture with its drink machines and signs located in just about every part of the world. Every year it reaps billions in profits, including $6.3 billion for the first 3 quarters of 2014. Nevertheless, its rate of profit is stagnant, and so the outrageously paid management team of CEO Mukhtar Kent is reducing its workforce to shave billions in annual costs by 2019. Just to let you know, Kent's total compensation for 2014 is calculated at $20.4 million. I repeat that, $20.4 million as head of Coca-Cola. Georgia and Atlanta's unemployment rates have topped the national charts through most of the recession and its so-called recovery. Following the loss of almost 1,000 jobs at Turner Broadcasting System, two of the corporations most identified with Atlanta are sacrificing the well-being of their often longtime employees to the demands of the profit at all costs system. And those are our headlines for today, January 5th. We're going to turn our microphone over to Paul McLennan with our labor history. Hi, Paul.
Thanks, Diane. One of the most suppressed and hidden stories of African and African American history is the largest armed slave uprising in U.S. history, which took place on January 8th, 1811. They spoke different languages, came from various parts of the U.S., Africa, and Haiti, and lived miles apart on plantations along the German coast of Louisiana. Yet after years of planning and secret meetings under the constant threat of immediate death, they staged a revolt. The German Coast Uprising had up to 500 participants marching to New Orleans to attempt a Haitian revolution and the establishing of a black republic in the U.S. with New Orleans as its capital. The victory of Africans in gaining their freedom and establishing the first black republic in Haiti in 1804 had a powerful and stimulating effect on Africans held in bondage all over the world, especially in the Western Hemisphere. It gave enormous encouragement to the Africans on plantations in Louisiana. Louisiana had developed a significantly different slave tradition than the rest of the U.S. Most early British North American slavery was in tobacco and rice in South Carolina, and then cotton in the 19th century. Louisiana money was made in sugar. This made it much more like the Caribbean. There was a lot more money in sugar than the other crops. This meant wealthier planters and higher concentration of slaves. Planning for the revolt began on January 6th, just after the end of the brutal sugar harvest. One leader was Charles de Landes, with men named Quamana and Harry also playing major roles. Quamana and another slave named Cook were warriors who had been imported from Africa around 1806. On the evening of January 8, 1811, Charles and his lieutenants began the rebellion. The rebels would elect their leaders to lead them into battle. They elected both women and men. The revolt began at the home of plantation owner Manuel Andre, about 36 miles north of New Orleans, along Lake Pontchartrain, in an area known as the German Coast because of a number of German planters in the area. The precise number of slaves involved are unclear, and estimates varied. The original revolt consisted of between 64 and 125 participants. As the slaves marched toward New Orleans, they picked up people along the way, leading to a final number of between 250 and 500. It is thought that between 10 and 25% of slaves from the various plantations affected joined the rebellion, mostly single young men under 30. Armed with hand tools, knives, and a few guns, they marched for 2 days, covering 20 miles. There is evidence that the slaves were aware of the Haitian Revolution and modeled this after that, a possibility given that many Haitian planters, including the de Landes family, had fled to Louisiana with their slaves during the Revolution. It also seems that some of the slaves had military experience in Ghana and Angola before their capture. We do know that the slaves marched in military formation in columns of 4. Their slogan was, "On to New Orleans and freedom or death," which they shouted as they marched to New Orleans. The response to the uprising was utterly brutal. Whites came at the slaves with maximum force. The U.S. military combined with French planters to suppress the rebellion. They came close to New Orleans before being turned and crushed near modern-day Norco, Louisiana. As they fled into the plantation backcountry and bayous, whites hunted them down. Another 44 were tried and executed. The total number of dead was around 95. What makes this response different than other slave rebellions is the brutality. Slave owners recognized the rebellion as a very real threat and wanted to be clear of the consequences. So they cut off the heads of the slaves, placed them on pikes, and lined the roads with them for over 60 miles in the most public and brutal suppression of slave agency in the nation's history. The revolt reasserted the humanity and redeemed the honor of the people. The uprising weakened the system of chattel slavery, stimulated more revolts in the following years, and set the stage for the final battle of the Civil War that put an end to this horrible, inhumane system. The women and men of 1811 represented the best qualities of people of African descent. They were people of exceptional courage, valor, and dedication. These women and men put the interest and welfare of the masses above their own personal desires. These were people who understood that the emancipation of the masses is a precondition for the emancipation of the individual. Their sacrifices were not in vain.
Paul and I were talking before the program about the fact that neither one of us had any knowledge of this, although we both feel that we probably know a little more than the average person about this kind of history. The reason I was so pleased that Paul pretty much digs up these things is a couple of reasons. I think one of the things that all of us, this is a program about working people, and I think, as I've mentioned other times, I think sometimes people's concept of who's included in the working class or who's included in this broad phrase, working people, gets very narrow. And certainly in this country, a huge percentage of working class history is the history of slave revolts and those who were in bondage, who resisted. That is a key element of the history that all of us who are workers really share, because there could have been no more stark exploitation. All of us who've had a job know what it's like to be under the thumb of a boss who's unreasonable, racist, sexist, his way or the highway kind of thing. But for the millions who were enslaved and who labored literally from sunrise to sunset and beyond, their history, both what they've contributed culturally, economically to this country, is a key part, as I said, of labor history. So I always really appreciate you bringing this up. And I guess we should talk about, too, the connection to the Haitian Revolution. This is a really interesting fact.
Well, it makes New Orleans as a port city an interesting place of intersection between the Caribbean and the U.S. South. And for us to understand the history of the South in particular, we need to know the history of slavery, because it's where it all started.
All right, we are going to go to a break right now. You are listening to the Labor Forum here on WRFG, our very first program of the year 2015. We will be back after these messages. This is Diane and Paul here in the studio. Welcome back. You are tuned into the Labor Forum here on WRFG 89.3 FM, your station for progressive information and hand-picked quality music. We're going to go right into our interview with our guest who's in the studio. I have to always remind people, you actually can watch us do radio right now. If you go onto the Labor Forum YouTube channel, it gives you a chance to sort of see what it's like here in the studio as we do this program. We also can be heard, besides the fact that those of you who are tuned into your radio, you can hear us on your mobile device because WRFG has an app. And we also, of course, can be heard on your computer online by going to WRFG.org. These are all the ways we're trying to meet the need for how our many listeners who are using so many different forms of communication devices now can actually listen to us 24/7. So, in the studio with us is Dewey McLean. Hi,
Hello.
Dewey.
Good. Don, how you doing?
I'm so happy that you decided to be our first guest on our first show in 2015.
Well, thank you very much for having me too. It's always good to have labor here in the house.
All right, so for those of you who may not know the name Dewey McLean, when you're not a football fan, two, he is the president of the Labor Council here in Atlanta, the North Georgia Atlanta Labor Council, and he is a state representative. Triple hats.
Triple hats, Diane, and great hats, and it's all for working men and women.
So we invited Dewey to come in because as you just heard with the announcement that was just made prior to his introduction, the Georgia General Assembly opens up on January 12th. Over the last, I don't know how many years, it seems forever to me, generally the General Assembly is bad news for poor and working people. It just seems as though, especially in the last several years, that each session, the more punitive things they can think of to do for poor people, working people, passes, and the things that we need, which are jobs and decent education and health care, go by the by, and taxes get cut for the rich and services get cut for the poor. So, but Dewey is in the General Assembly, and so we asked him to come in and talk about some of the legislation that is he and others who have the interests of the majority of us on their minds are going to be pursuing. So that's a good thing for us to know, because you know, when you read the newspapers and hear on television, you may not actually very much hear about some of this legislation that would actually benefit us. So I know the big thing, or at least the big thing that I know about,
Okay.
is an attempt to raise the minimum wage.
Yes, that is probably, I say, one of the biggest things, because we pre-filed it. It's called HB8. You can always go to the website, the House website, and look at the bill. But what we're asking for is $15 an hour minimum wage. And you look at $15 an hour minimum wage, you're only talking about $31,000 a year, and that's before taxes. So, and what I'm saying to the listeners, as well as to my colleagues in the House, is that that's still not a livable wage, but it's better than getting us to middle wage. And I shouldn't say middle wage, but there is no middle income. You know, we're there. You know, we've got poor and we've got rich, but what happened to the middle? What happened to the middle class? So this won't put you in middle class, but it'll sure make you feel a whole lot better.
Now, let's get this clarified, because there's a federal minimum wage and there's a state minimum wage.
Yes.
So tell us
This
what the
one-
difference there is.
Okay. The difference between the state minimum wage, which is, excuse me, is real low, it's $5.15 an hour.
Is it, that's just so totally unbelievable, you can't even comprehend it. You can't even go to a fast food joint and get a burger for $5.15.
It costs you $7.25 to get a burger, so therefore you can't even afford a burger. But that's the federal minimum wage. The federal minimum wage is $7.25, and it has been that since 1993. So what we're asking for is a state minimum wage to go to $15 an hour, which, you know, you can supersede the federal, because the federal is saying at least the minimum you should pay is $7.25. But here in Georgia, you know, we decided that we want to be number one in business, but we're not number one for workers. And I think that's what we have to try to change the conversation.
All right, so there may be people out there who say, well, there's nobody who gets paid $5.25 an hour. So, because the federal minimum wage is $5.15 an hour, and the federal wage is $7. So who are these people who are actually receiving $5?
Well, you know, you can, I don't know if I can say the companies, but there are a lot of companies that are paying $7 an hour, $7.25 an hour, no benefits, I mean, if you're getting $7.25 and you get no health benefits, you get no dental, you get no vision, you get no 401k, and I'm just saying, there's no retirement. So you're not really making very much. So, but there are a lot of companies out there, you know, and a lot of people are saying, well, the fast food companies, were done just for high school kids. But I'm very sorry, the economy has gotten so bad. I visited a lot of fast food places, and there were not children there, or high school kids, or youth in there working. These were people that were grown adults trying to take care of their families. And there are a lot of places that are paying below federal minimum wage, and more so fast food. I mean, and really, you've got waitresses who make $2.30 plus tips. So you look at those, and then you also look at the healthcare industry, people that work in homes with seniors and things like that. They're making a lot less than $8 an hour, $7 an hour. So there are some industries that are, and that's kind of where a lot of people are in the city. I mean, no, they're not very technical. A lot of technical jobs paying that, but we don't have those people in our pool.
So let me ask this other question. Because of the movement, really, of fast food workers, and we've had many of them on this program, that is really, in my opinion, the fact that the workers themselves have taken these very bold, creative actions, have raised this issue. And there are a number of states now who have actually passed and increased their minimum wages. Some of them not as much as $15, but $10 or $12. And then there are cities such as Los Angeles and Seattle and others that have actually passed $15 minimum wages. So what's your prognosis here? What do you think? Do you think the legislators in Georgia are inclined to look at this situation from the point of view of how, if workers were making $15 an hour, how this would spur
Well,
the economy?
And in fact, that's been my biggest push, is that if these folks receive $15 an hour, you can assure that they're not investing this money. They're spending this money. This money, excuse me, is staying in the community.
Go ahead.
And we got to make sure that the money stays there. Tell you what, give me some water, I'll be okay.
Here we go.
Here, we'll rescue a movie.
Thank you. Okay, now let's get back to that $15 an hour that we're gonna spend in the community.
I know it sticks in your throat to think of it.
I mean, yes it did, because now I can get it out. I can swallow it. You know, if these folks get $15 an hour, they're gonna spend this money in the community, and they're gonna spend this on basic needs. They're gonna spend this on shelter. They're gonna spend this on utilities. They're gonna spend this on food.
So it goes right back into the economy.
It goes right back in the economy. In fact, 100% of it does. I can assure you that. One. Two, the employer, he would probably get a better employee if he paid $15 an hour. Because instead of me, if you paying me $7 or $8 an hour, I can assure you that every day I come to work, I'm looking for something better. So therefore, you can retain me a little better if you're paying $15 an hour. So the only pushback I've gotten are from small businesses that we're going to hurt them. Well, 89% of them said that they don't agree with it. But I assured them one thing: 100% of the employees I've talked to would like to have it. So I told them 100% is a whole lot better than 89%. And it's a right thing to do. This helps the economy. And in fact, if you look at the GBI-PI report, the Georgia Public Budget Institute report, it says that the money will go back into the economy. It says that it'll help small business because they're going to spend the money at the small businesses. So we've got to make sure that this can happen. The conversation has to happen.
Can you explain how, for people who don't know, you said pre-file, how the process works in terms of getting a piece of legislation passed?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. Well, pre-file means that right now, I can tell you that it's on the record. If you go to the Georgia House, you can read the proposed bill already that's there. So it is something that you can do before session starts. So that's kind of where this is. So right now, I'm the co-signer. The first signer was Tyrone Brooks,
Okay.
Representative Brooks. And I was the second signer, and then in fact on Wednesday we're doing a little press conference to talk about HB8 and and what we're looking for workers. This is more of a workers' bill than anything else. And so once we pre-filed it, and once session starts, then we will file it.
Okay.
Now once we file it, it'll be given to a committee, and if it comes out of committee, then it'll get a first read, then a committee, and then after that, it can be voted on. Now, will it ever make it out of committee? Don't know. I mean, we don't have, I tell folks there are 61 Democrats, 1 independent, and 118 Republicans in the House. So, which doesn't give them a supermajority.
Well, I think the point is that regardless of what the little party identification of any of these folks is, the people who are in their district, as we say on this program time and time again, the majority of people, not just the majority, the overwhelming majority of people are workers. And so if workers push and press for this and make their voices heard, regardless of what party they're with, they're going to have to at least know what is in the interest of their constituents. I want to ask a question a little bit about when the $15, because in a variety of these states, they have, it goes into effect, this year, or that year, 2 years, 3 years. So is this graduated? So in other words, by, in a year it goes up to this, and then a year after that it goes up to that, or is it boop, $15 right now?
Well, the bill is $15 right now, and that's why it goes to committee and goes into study groups to say, right now that maybe, but bills, let me go back. Bills are going into effect either in January or in July, which January was HB 714, who took away the unemployment. It started January.
We're going to talk about that in a minute.
Okay, I'm sorry, but anyway, just catch you up. So therefore, that's what we can talk about. We can amend the bill to say gradually or whatever, but our hopes is that can we get to the 15? Some of the states have already done that, by saying, by the end of 2016, we'll be at 13. Mid 2016, we'll be at 14. So it can be done in increments, but we have to start the conversation to get to that number. If we'd kept up with inflation and cost of living adjustment, we would be at almost $25 or $30 an hour.
That's right.
And not us talking about 15.
So you raised this other bill. Now, we had people on again this program, and there was a huge fight, and there was a temporary victory. This is all about the Commissioner of Labor, I guess it's 2 years ago.
2 years ago,
now,
right.
All of a sudden, out of the blue, telling school workers who get laid off in the summer that they were no longer eligible for unemployment. So there were rallies, there were demonstrations, there was petitions, there was just all kinds of organizing and mobilizing done particularly by bus drivers and cafeteria workers and others. And it was pushed back. And there was a temporary victory where it was restored. Then the General Assembly came into session last year, a year ago, and passed a bill. Please talk about that bill.
That was probably one of the horrific things I can say that was ever done to workers. You're talking about school bus drivers. You're talking about cafeteria workers. You're talking about crossing guards. You're talking about 3 different sessions in the school system. Now, don't get me wrong. You're talking about more so private schools than you are public schools and county schools and city schools. But in Chatham County, the school bus drivers and the cafeteria workers work for private companies. So they're not paid by the school system. HB 714 took away unemployment from the workers who would get off in summer, but not only in summer, but also had that 2 or 3 week layoff during the holidays, during Christmas. And I do like to applaud the committee for allowing it not to be so quick, but to be partially gradual, because instead of it going into effect in July, when we finished session last year in March, that they allowed well, it was a bill that started January 1st, 2015. So we have not seen the effects of it, but what we have seen though are some companies trying to step up because that's what's going to happen. Now they're going to lose a lot of workers that they've had because it wasn't a lot of money, but it tied them over until school started. So who's going to hire anybody for 2 months? Nobody that I know of. And some workers and some companies are saying maybe we may need to pay them more. Well, that would help because that helps quite a bit. Two, they don't want to lose good employees, so they're trying to come up with ways. What the answer is? The answer is to appeal HB 714 and do a study. I asked for a study group. That was my day 20 in the House of my rookie year. I'll never forget it. I went to the well for 15 minutes to say how bad and outlandish this bill was to working men and women, and why. And we could not be the only state in the union that are having those problems. That we could set the mark. We could be the state that did a study to look and see exactly how is the best way to treat these workers without just taking away their benefits.
Well, if I could say, I mean, one of the issues it brings up is the subcontracting out, again, especially in public schools, subcontracting out of work that has been done for decades by direct employees of the school system. And then to save money, they go to the Aramarks and the First Students and these companies who, if they're going to make a profit, very clearly, they cut the wages and they make things harder for the workers. So this was, again, in my opinion, just a really mean-spirited bill that went after some of the least paid, the least organized workers in the entire state, and essentially just kind of threw them into the garbage heap over the summer and these vacations. I know even during that period of time, right after this, first it was just a decision by the labor commissioner, people lost their homes. People lost their cars during those summer months.
Yes.
When they weren't even getting unemployment.
It was so sad. I'll remember when I brought up the question in committee, they didn't allow comments or discussion in the hearing part of the committee.
Right.
The first day that when we first talk about this, let's talk about this. We had the snowstorm in January, the little second week in January. The week before that, they called these bus drivers, these crossing guards, and cafeteria workers heroes and sheroes. That's what they were calling them. Then the next week, they took away their unemployment. And that, I only can give my speech because I says I would not want to be a hero or shero in this state if that's how you were treated and respected, because right now that's not what a hero and a shero deserves. And I guess that's probably why they bumped it off to not to have it start in July, but at least give them to January. Yippee. Well, my only concern is that we just need to make sure that these bus drivers, these cafeteria workers, and these crossing guards, they are the first ones to see your little children, little Johnny, little Sally, little Fred or whatever. The bus driver is the first one you see. The crossing guard is there to cross them out of the school, and when they're hungry at lunch, they see they see the cafeteria lady. So for you not to treat these people as a who takes care of your most precious asset with any respect, it bothers me. It really bothers me. And mean spirit, I think it was mean spirit. What happened 2 years ago was they had to go back because the federal government told them that they couldn't do it, so they had to create local legislation, pass something in the state of Georgia to supersede the federal government, and that's what they did. And those are things that we do. And this year, hopefully, we can play more offense. HB 8 has been filed. 1099 workers, you know, something of the, because we're a lot of companies and corporations under fraud in the state with 1099 workers. So I'm going, you know, that's going to be filed too. So I want us to play offense a little bit. I want the other side of the aisle, or members of the other side of the aisle, to explain to working men and women why they don't deserve to be treated with dignity, and one, and then two, why do you allow some companies and corporations to get away with not paying their fair share of taxes and Social Security and, you know, and state.
Workers' comp.
Yes, and workers' comp and state, yes.
I know that we had programs on this radio station here to explain exactly how it was, that the Labor Department claimed that it didn't have enough money and that's why it was going after this subgroup of workers. But we have to explain how it is that the state funding for unemployment compensation got so drained. Of course, there was a recession, but prior to that had been boom years where they said to all the employers, oh, we're so flush with money, we don't need for you to even pay into the unemployment compensation fund. So those corporations got off scot-free for a number of years, and then who got it in the neck was, as I said,
The workers.
the lowest paid and some of the most important workers, as you have mentioned.
The workers, and now instead of saying, well, we are so flush, you know, we're not flush now, we need you all to step back in, greedy corporations and greedy, we need you all to step back in and help us get back flush again. They're not doing that, and that's one of the things that if you look at, there are only 20% of the corporations in the state of Georgia paying their fair share of workers' comp and state employment. 20%. And my question, I tell you, because I spent 20 minutes, I said, what would you think if you got 20 cents out of every dollar that you were given?
You were owed.
Yeah. I mean, what could you do? And I guess, a lot of things fall on deaf ears because, again, it's a lot of us say just follow the money, and you'll see that greedy gets greedier and the poor gets poor.
I had a question, Dewey, about your district and your motivation to run, and how in that white book that they put out every year that has the list of all the legislators, what's interesting to me is when you see the occupations and you see bankers and lawyers, but you very rarely see, I guess, a union member. So what was it like for you to be, I don't know if you were the first, but certainly one of the few?
When I took this on, I took it on for workers, and I wanted to make sure they had a voice. And I'll tell you, my first year as a CLC president, I had to spend a lot of time at the Capitol. And so, it was kind of like going to the Capitol, sitting out in the hallway, waiting on legislators to come outside to tell me what was going on in the inside. And I kept saying, this is not really what life's about. And so when the opportunity came for me to be one, to go in the inside, to look you in the face and say, that's not right. I mean, it was kind of like, how you want to say, instant. It was kind of like, it was one of those things you can say on time. Just as quick as they said it, I could be texting it to somebody, and not waiting. So you're right. You've got bankers, lawyers, Chamber of Commerce presidents,
Real estate.
Developers, dentists, and you will always notice one thing, small business owners, you'll always notice one thing about them, is that they're there for self-interest, and that's one thing I try to share with them, that they should not be there for self-interest, they should be there for the people, and that's kind of what I tell them. Right is right, wrong is wrong. And my district knows that there's one thing about me. I always tell folks I represent House District 100, and I have assured them that I will always be 100.
And is this Lilburn, Snellville?
Lilburn, this is unincorporated Lilburn, unincorporated Snellville, unincorporated Duluth, and unincorporated Lawrenceville.
Okay.
So it's those 4 areas that I always tell folks, go back to my playing days, it is where I ran. you know. So I know that community, north, east, south, and west. And in fact, it's so amazing that I live right in the middle of that district. And when I wanted to run north 2 miles, I would go up almost to Sugarloaf. When I wanted to run east, I'd run to Highway 29 where it stops. If I wanted to run west, 85 where it stopped. And if I wanted to run south, like I'm coming toward Atlanta, it starts at Beaver Run Road.
Okay.
You know, so and I'm right. So it's just you know, I think it was made for me, and it gives me an opportunity to at least push working men and women forward.
And I'm guessing it's a very diverse district.
Oh, very diverse. Well, it is Georgia. It is, I tell people it is Georgia. It is probably 67% Democratic. And I always tell folks that it is 67% Democratic, but I got 82% of the vote because my people know it's not about being a Democrat or about being a Republican, about being independent. It's about being right. And that's you. And you're correct. I have every denomination in my district. The makeup from Hispanics to Asians to African Americans to whites or just about. I'd say I'm 30% white, 25% African American, 25% Hispanic, and the other 15% Asian. So I mean,
That's a microcosm.
It is Georgia. It is Georgia, and I feel good about the people that I represent.
Let me ask you about any of the other bills that might be pending. There's so many other issues that are important to working people. Obviously, the whole question still about Medicaid expansion. That's just there was a big article in Atlanta, the AJC on Sunday about, again, these rural hospitals closing because they just can't afford to keep their doors open. In a large part, it's because of the number of poor and uninsured people. And other bills in regard to taxes, tax breaks for corporations. What are some of the other things that you think are going to be on hot
well, you know,
items?
you've pre-filed a few. You know, with the as we know, the medical marijuana is coming back, and I think it's going to be it'll be there. I know that you're talking about the Medicaid expansion. I mean, sometimes I just think that a lot of things that the other side of the aisle do are mean-spirited because there are 3 more insurance companies that have signed on for the affordable health care to be part of it this year in the state of Georgia. But we passed legislation last year to say that we can't even speak on that if you work for the state of Georgia, you can't speak on about the affordable health care. Yeah,
Includes legislators?
well, we're exempt for the fact of it is I represent people and I don't, but it was people that the department heads
Right.
and people that work.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
unbelievable.
really unbelievable.
I would
And that
think-
was one, and then the other one they wanted to make you to pass a drug test every time, and then you got to pay for the drug test. And I'm saying. And so if I pass the drug test for $25 or $30 and you're not going to give me your $25 or $30 worth more of a food stamp, I'm coming to you for assistance already. I'm spending $25 for the drug test because you won't give me the assistance I need till I take the drug test. So after I pass the drug test, I'm still out $25. And I'm saying, where is the justice of that? I mean, if I pass, I should get my money back, at least my money back, make me back whole. But they for some reason they just thought that just showed the cost of you doing business, and I'm saying, well, wow, boy, that just really, I'm already hard up, and that's what you want me to do.
Now, if that's being held, right? Because
Right now,
Florida-
yeah, because the federal government says, you all can't do that. Again, the federal government is saying, those
Georgia, you have passed over the line.
Georgia, you'll pass over the line, and then and I say that. I want the listeners to understand something, that 30%, 32% of the state of Georgia's $42 billion budget is federal government funds. It is federal funds. And all they keep saying is that they would like to balance the federal budget. Well, if the federal government decided to keep 30% of the funds that they give us, it'd be very difficult for us to balance our budget. But I just want the listeners to understand that let's quit saying the boys, the federal government is not doing X, Y, Z. They are doing what they can to help states, and they help us by 30% of the we get $19 billion from the federal government. I mean, in education we get money from the federal government. In roads and bridges we get it from the federal government. So I just want us to realize what we get, and you just can't keep on saying that I want some. I can't pick and choose, and that's what I think they're doing. They're trying to pick and choose.
And there's always money for roads. They don't have any problem with that when it comes to, but not for public transit.
Yes.
Okay, Dewey, so we've just got a couple minutes left. One of the things I think people in general, and I think one of the things that Moral Monday perhaps has helped do is to break down this sort of sense that ordinary people don't go to the Capitol. We don't raise our voices to anybody. We just sort of have to sit and be quiet while they talk. So I think the Moral Monday actions of last year have sort of broken that a little bit, but I still think that people are feel very uncomfortable, not welcome, not listened to at the Capitol. What would you advise our listeners who have interest in any of the legislation that's coming up, and we've only touched on a little bit of it. There's lots more right-wing stuff coming down the pipe.
I am very sorry. The name of that place is called the People's House. The People's House. The people should be able to go down and speak to their legislature. You represent the people. And that's what, when I'm invited places, I go to tell people I represent the people of Georgia. I represent my district, but my district is Georgia, but I represent the people of Georgia. My only concern is when you go down, you need to go down and just talk to your legislator, because the fact is that the squeaky wheel will get some oil. But if you don't squeak, you won't get anything. They just think everything is okay. It's all hunky dory. It's all dandy. So I encourage you to go down, because it's real simple to bring your legislator out. And the reason I said what I said earlier was because that was the reason that a few of the people on the other side of the aisle said that they get up and grandstand about the federal government need to do this, the federal government need to do that, is because the people in their own district don't know that the federal government is paying 30% of the budget. And he said, dude, we don't tell them that. We just tell them that, and I says, wow. I mean, that's disingenuous to not want to tell people that the federal government is paying 30% of our budget. But they don't want to hear that, dude. They just want to hear you think we beating them up. I'm saying, wow. But anyway, I will encourage all of them to come down. I encourage you all to come down and visit me if you have some concern. And if your legislator won't come outside to visit with you, come and get me, and I am in the inside. I can go and find him and have him come outside and find out why he can't talk to his constituents. It's because I want the conversation. This year the conversation is going to be on, I'm going to be on offense. I'm going to ask you to look someone in the face and ask them why they can't deserve $15 an hour, why they have to take a drug test and not get paid for the drug test after they pass the drug test, and I need help from you. Why can't we expand, Medicaid expansion here? We got hospitals closing. Why we can't ask these corporations who we gave all these tax breaks to that when we were doing well and all that good stuff, why can't we get that back?
Exactly.
Okay.
Thank you so much. So listeners,
Thank you.
Thank you.
have been hearing the voice of Dewey McClain, and those of you who are watching on YouTube have seen the animation of the man and
Okay.
and that he's definitely on our side. I want to make sure that you tune in again next Monday for the Labor Forum here at 4 to 5. And Dewey said you are all invited, and you also heard the PSA from Moral Monday. You are particularly invited January 12th to come both to the church across the street, Central Presbyterian, at 10 o'clock, and then for an action later that afternoon. We'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.